So one last task in this particular section, and that's to return our current user object for the currently logged in user. And let's go into Solution Explorer. I'm just going to tidy things up at the top again. And inside the application user folder, I'm just going to create a new class and call it current user. And inside here, this is just going to be a normal query handler. So I'll use the QHandler snippets to add this. And what we're going to return from here is our user object. And I'll just add the imports here. So we need the mediator, we need the one for persistence, and we need the system threading tasks and system.threading. And I'll just reformat. And what we want to do in here is, because we're getting a user, we can actually use user manager rather than data context. Although we can use data context as well, it really doesn't matter. But since we have access to a user manager, let's make use of that. And what we also need is our JWT generator and our user accessor so that we can populate the user object that we're returning from this. So let's bring in the user manager and call it, and we also need to give it the app user entity and call it user manager. We'll also bring in IJWT generator and call it JWT generator. And we also need to bring in IUser accessor and call it user accessor. And we'll also need to bring in all of these things. So we'll need to bring in ASP.NET Core identity and also our domain and also our application interfaces, and we don't need the underscore context in there, but let's create the fields from parameters for all three of these. And also for the user accessor as well. And then I can just remove this dot from here. And let's make use of this in our code. So first thing we want to do is we want to get our user from the database, and we'll say var user equals await, and we can say user manager. And what we can use is one of the find methods that this provides. And because it's going to be the username that we're querying on here, this one, find by name async, finds and returns a user, if any, who has the specified username. So we'll use this one, and then the username will specify as the user accessor and get current username. And what we can do then is just return a new user, and we'll set the display name equal to user.displayname, the username equal to user.username, the token we'll set equal to JWT generator, create token and pass the user, and then finally we'll just set the image to null for the time being. And we'll have to come back and correct this later on, but for now we'll just set it to null. And then what we can do is create another method in our users controller. So we'll open up the user controller, and inside here we'll create an HTTP GET method. And we won't give it any additional routing here because we've only got a single HTTP GET, and in order to get to the current user we'll be specifying the route as API/user and HTTP GET. So we don't need to specify an extra routing parameter there. So we'll say public async task, and we're really doing just the same thing as above. We're returning an action result of the user, and I'll just call this current user. And then what we want to do is say return await and mediator dot send, and then we can specify new current user dot query. And I just need to close off the statement here. So let's go and test this is working, and I'll just head back to Postman. And we have a request lined up to go and get the current user. So we're going to the URL API/user, and we're sending our authorization and our bearer token as the value. And what I'll need to do is go and get a token for one of our users, which is going to be Bob, and I'm just going to copy this token into my clipboard and then just go to our get current user request and overwrite the token that's in here and paste this in. And when I click send, we should get back a user object for the currently logged in user. And indeed we do. So this works fine and we get our currently logged in user back, but what happens if I remove the authorization and try and make a GET request to API user and I click send, then we actually get a 500 internal server error. And this is because if we take a look at our controller, we're allowing anonymous at the controller level, which means that we're still attempting to send this request to our handler even though we're not authorized for this request, which clearly requires a token. So what we'll do is we'll just move the allow anonymous down to our login and register method, and I'll just put it above the login and also above the register. And this means that this HTTP GET is going to be covered by our authorization policy. And if we go back and take a look and make this request again, then this time we get the 401 unauthorized, which is what we're looking for in this particular case. We don't want to be able to, or we don't want to return a 500 internal server error when it's a request that should be authorized before the user is allowed to access it. And we should still be able to log in successfully and retrieve a token back as well. And we can. So we've come to the end of the identity section on the API. Pretty big section, quite a lot of moving pieces to get this particular functionality set up. And really, we've only scratched the surface of identity and ASP.NET Core as well. And what we've done so far is really just the minimum possible to allow us to log in and register users to our application and authenticate them as well. But this meets the requirements of our particular application at this stage, and we will take a look later, although this is going to be deferred into a bonus section about more features of identity and different things that we can do with identity as well. But for now, this is good enough to move forward with our application. So what we'll do now is we'll take our changes, all of them, and quite a lot in this case, and what we'll do is we'll stage these and we'll commit them, and I'll say end of section 12, and we'll just push these up to GitHub. And what we'll take a look at next is a summary, and then of course we're going to implement this on our client application.